Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
This show is brought to you by Audible. They are the leading provider of spoken audio information and entertainment. You know I'm a huge Audible fan because you can listen to audiobooks whenever and wherever you want. Whether you're at the beach, the gym, or stuck in traffic, there's nothing quite like Audible. Go to audiblepodcast.com/Lutz and sign up today. You are listening to the financialsurvivalnetwork.com. I'm Kerry Lutz at 1230 WBZT. We've got Dr. Jeff Lewis with us of silver-coin-investor.com. We're talking about silver supplies, about a new book that you should really be thinking about reading, and a lot more. Dr. Jeff, welcome back to the Financial Survival Network.
Thanks, Kerry. Great to be here.
Hey, so what about these silver supplies? I mean, the COMEX inventories, both gold and silver, are really dropping like a stone.
Yeah, it's been a trend that we've been seeing for a while. I think, as you know, Ted Butler would probably point out that it's the turnover that is probably more important, that may indicate more, tightness of supply. Gold, I think, stands out in that, you look at all of the charts that show supply and you see these dramatic downturns, and at the same time you see that JP Morgan is now, kind of concentrated or cornered the long side of the market. And I think that, it may be a reach, but the rationalization that, your, gold and silver are, final payment, good collateral, it's sort of a parallel to what's happening everywhere. And, in a macro sense, it's a parallel to what's happening in the repo market we were discussing earlier, where you have a diminishing amount of collateral for these very important transactions that really provide the trillions of dollars of daily liquidity for the world financial system. And so we're probably seeing, a parallel, happening there.
Interesting. So, there's a lack of so-called good collateral because the Fed has beaten everybody to it. They've been buying it up, right?
Yes, as you know, the current $85 billion per month QE, half of that, or a little more than half of that, is buying directly treasuries. And the repo market, these daily loans or these transactions that amount to trillions of dollars each day, depend on those treasuries as well for collateral. And without that collateral, because the Fed is now competing for it, you risk a freeze in that repo market, which threatens the same event that triggered the Lehman crisis. And if you extend that rationale, as the Tylers on Zero Hedge have been jumping up and down about for the last year or more, then you can also see that one of the reasons why we may be, looking to get involved in another war is that it expands our deficit, which has been diminishing, which then gives the Fed, a little more excuse to expand the bond buying program and to print more money, as bond buying, or QE is just another euphemism of the many for just outright money printing.
So are you telling me that the concept of a guy like Chris Duane, that debt and death go together along with this hyper-hypothecation, that if you don't have constant wars, debt, and death, then the system crumbles? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Well, that's an I hadn't thought about it that way. But, I think you can make the argument, you can make the case for that. Unfortunately, these systems that have become so disconnected from reality, as they spin out of control, they are destructive, and they cause death and destruction. And it's just it's a sad state of affairs.
It really is. It really is. I mean, if that's what it's all come down to, because the whole thing of hyper-hypothecation is you got to keep having more debt so you can keep on hypothecating it, right? And once you run out of debt, once the supply begins to diminish, where does that leave you?
Yeah. It's every new, all new money requires debt in order to be created, and you need to service that debt, and that's going to require new money, and you start to approach this inflection point, which, if you look at history, it doesn't, it doesn't match. We don't repeat it perfectly, but we rhyme it, and we've been down this path before. Humans have, once a governing body has taken control politically or directly of the money of money printing or the ability to create money, it's always abused. And here we are with the fiat currency, just over 40 years, and that's about the average survival time. And it's a depressing subject, but I know that you are you like to come back to the fact that we, at least in the U.S., in America, we have not only the spirit but the infrastructure to. It may not be quite the doom and gloom that our imaginations tend to run wild with when we discuss these issues.
Yeah, well, I don't like to be all doom and gloom, but this massive debt cycle, it really always requires a steady supply of more debt, more spending, and when it doesn't have it, it tends to collapse, right? That's right. And in the collapse, you have a desperate attempt to keep the system going. So in other words, as things start to, once we begin to spiral or collapse, and, now the government needs, money just to keep the doors open, it takes full control of the Fed. And that's where you get the massive money printing, and that's where the hyperinflation begins. And, we're on that path. I know we're on that path. And, the question is, what is the timing? And no one knows that for sure. And, we try to look in a million different places for a clue as to, how close we're getting. And we have these abstract indices that we can sort of track. Gold and silver are really not yet. I mean, as you know, the metals have been suppressed for decades. And, while they've been able to rise, that rise really isn't, an indication or a parallel to the amount of money that's been created, especially in the last 5 years. So there, it's tough to even see how the metals really are. Lots of people rationalize it. The mainstream media will certainly rationalize, well, gold or silver did this because of that, or, but just today, as we were watching the metals dropped as, the drum beats of war get louder and louder, the counterintuitive nature of, the price really keeps people confused. And I think one of the reasons that, regulators will turn away from, looking at these markets carefully is that the perception is that, investors really shouldn't be here because it's too volatile, or, look, gold and silver are not, playing the role of a safe haven or an effective inflation hedge, at least in the short term, which most people are pretty focused on. Yeah, well, the next crisis is going to be the one to watch, isn't it?
Yeah, and it looks like we're going to get one soon.
All signs are pointing to it. So, do you think Syria, what's going on there, is just one big diversion here, Jeff?
Well, I'm torn between diversion and necessity. Necessity because, again, to keep things going, to keep the Ponzi alive, the world needs another, like you were saying about Chris Duane's statement, needs more death and destruction so that it can have the excuse to finance it. And it's pretty cynical to think that way, but I believe that that's a big part of, obviously the Middle East is the center of some pretty important resources, but, that chart that shows the decline in military spending is a big deal. And we blowing out deficits would certainly rationalize at least one reason to keep on printing, because as you know, if they really taper, which I think they may, then the key behavioral, perceptual, indices that people look at to sort of get some sort of idea of where we are, the Dow or those things are going to take a big hit, and there'll be the fear factor will return. And, again, that may be for another excuse to keep printing, because, you can't stop.
Yeah, once you start, you can't stop. Once the connection between precious metals and a currency is broken, you can't go back until there's a collapse. I think that's what it comes down to, right?
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah, so...
But, yeah, go ahead.
So the road forward, it's going to have a lot of potholes, to say the least.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, we're in for interesting times here, no question about it.
No, and we've, I think that when we look back, like if we listen to this conversation, 5 years from now, we will probably marvel at how we were going through it. Although we didn't really know, we have this connection, we're able to, connect across the country, but we didn't really understand how far along the path that we were, and so it will be something interesting to reflect on.
Yeah. So up next, there's a book that you informed me of. It's on our sponsor Audible's site. I've downloaded it now. Want to talk about it on the financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Kerry Lutz here with Dr. Jeff Lewis on 1230 WBZT. Hi, it's Kerry Lutz. I recently decided to move my retirement account into physical precious metals to hedge against the coming times. If you want to move an existing retirement account into physical precious metals that you can hold in your hand, tax-free, there's no company that can do it more quickly and efficiently than Regal Assets. It took them just 24 hours to open my new IRA account, and all I had to do was fill out one simple form. The best part is that Regal Assets does all the work for you. They cover the setup and administrative costs for 2013. If you're interested in making the same move I did, call 855-678-6620, 855-678-6620. That's 855-678-6620, or visit them at regalassets.com. You'll be glad you did, and tell them Kerry sent you. And we're back. Kerry Lutz on the financialsurvivalnetwork.com. We're here with Dr. Jeff Lewis on 1230 WBZT. So, Dr. Jeff, it's a book you told me about. It's on our sponsor, audible.com, and you told me about it. I instantly downloaded it. It's written by Nassim Taleb. Tell us about that book.
So the book is called AntiFragile, and I think one way of summarizing the concepts that he lays out is that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And
Nietzsche said that too, I think, and I think he was pretty serious about it.
Yeah, right, exactly. So Taleb borrows a lot from Nietzsche, and lots of the ancients, and it's a very eclectic sort of narrative that I think people will find entertaining, but fascinating in that it dovetails well with what we were kind of talking about before, not only in how things have led to the point where we're going to have this black swan or collapse, or we think we see the next black swan. We know, obviously, by definition, we won't see it coming, but we're much more vulnerable because the system has been, usurped from any kind of natural, fundamental, course. There's so much intervention in our markets that, in a way, they're protected. The fuels, if you consider the market as this large forest that, has not been allowed to burn off the way a forest would naturally.
Yeah,
so
great example.
You have this buildup of fuels, and now, you're faced with, like, just a little spark will burn the whole thing down. And, we are about to experience that, I believe, because we have these fuels that have built up that, we're still walking around in the forest like nothing's happening. And it's a beautiful forest, but we just don't realize, and we've sort of lost the ability to recognize that, those fuels that are building up are dangerous. We need to do something about it. And people have been shouting for a long time, look, let's be careful, let's do something about it. It's you and I might say to build an earthquake kit.
Hey, here's
silver or gold in it. Get ready. We're going to have an earthquake at some point.
Here's a perfect example. He's got with the Audible book, he's got a supplement that you can look at, and he's showing, like, on here, the central triad, 3 types of exposure: fragile, robust, anti-fragile. So for businesses, all right, and this has just made me really laugh. You're going to get a kick out of this. Businesses, New York banking system, that's fragile. For robust, he doesn't have anything. But then for anti-fragile, he has Silicon Valley, okay? And Silicon Valley, it's fail fast, be foolish. So it's the antithesis of the New York banking system. And then errors, hates mistakes. That's fragile. Robust, mistakes are just information. And anti-fragile, which you could apply to Silicon Valley as well, loves mistakes since they are small. I mean, that's like Edison, that's like Tesla. Mistakes are information, and they set you on the right path, right? I mean, this is like really obvious stuff, but it's great.
Exactly. And, just as we were discussing before, the doom and gloom, we're on this road to chaos, but there's a spirit, and there's an American spirit where, mistakes are okay. It's part of the game. We're not afraid to make mistakes, and we're not afraid to take risks or take chances because, we'll correct them. We're confident enough that we can get through it. And that's why there's hope, for, a culture like ours to get through what's coming. And it doesn't have to be, even though.
Here's a great one. I hate to interrupt. Here's a great one.
Go ahead.
Financial dependence, corporate employment, that's fragile, tantalized class, obviously New York City, robust, dentist, dermatologist, niche worker, minimum wage earner. Okay, and then anti-fragile, he's talking about New York City taxi driver, artisan, prostitute, F.U. money. The guy's got a good sense of humor here, if nothing else.
Yeah, it's a great book. It's very entertaining. It's a bit all over the place. He definitely he's a fascinating. He's got a fascinating life, and he certainly shares a lot of those experiences. And there was one example where he said the idea is to have, it's not so much to just be rich, it's to be wealthy enough so that you can hate the rich. And you go to a party and where rich people have big houses, and usually they only invite people who also have big houses, and all they do is talk about the marble that they had designed, and you'd rather talk to the taxi driver, and it's
hang out with the limo drivers in front, right?
Right. Yeah, it's an
great.
excellent read. I think you'll really enjoy reading it, as will many other readers.
Mm-hmm. Well, hey, if you want to go there, get a free month or free book, free subscription for a month, audiblepodcast.com/LUTZ, audiblepodcast.com/Lutz. Go there and sign up. I can hardly wait to start listening to this and reading it with the guide. I mean, there's just like great stuff here. Like one thing for us libertarians, which I know, Jeff, you count yourself amongst us. Fragile, political systems, nation state, centralized, and then anti-fragile, collection of city-states, decentralized. I'm beginning more and more to believe that that is eventually where we're going to head, because we just can't afford these centralized systems that they only exist to make your life miserable, right? I mean, let's face it. Here, fragile, academic, corporate, executive, pope, bishop, politician, robust, postal employee, truck driver, train conductor, anti-fragile, artist, writer. I'm not quite sure about what this means because I haven't read it yet, but it all fits in, I assure you, because he's one bright guy, Nassim Taleb, right?
Yeah.
So getting back here to gold and silver, how it all fits in here, obviously when you own gold and silver, you become anti-fragile because you're no longer as dependent on those Federal Reserve notes. You're your own central bank. To some extent, you're not dependent upon those notes as much as you were, other than to handle your day-to-day transactions. Your savings, your wealth is nobody's counterparty risk, right?
That's right. The metals themselves are also robust because they are what they are. They don't change. They're the same way. You and I could be talking about gold and silver 4,000 years ago. We would be talking about the same thing.
That's exactly right. And what we're going through here, let's face it, Jeff, is nothing new here. It's not like this is the first time it's ever happened. You just go back in history, and the history books are replete with such examples. And we can say with all our technology, everything else, well, it's never happened quite this way before. And you go back to that old Mark Twain quote, history doesn't repeat, but it sure as heck does rhyme. And we're rhyming pretty well right now, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Bernal's another book that would be I don't know if, I'll have to check and see if Audible has it. We can look it up later, but out of 100 hyperinflations that he studied, they all basically had different aspects that led to the spiral or the inflection point, but they all eventually got there. And just because we're living in the modern age, or we have all of this amazing technology and cultural advances, and it doesn't really matter. It's the same thing all over again.
Yeah, exactly the point. So you're somebody who's just kind of come up and you just realized what the heck was going on here, Jeff. What would you do? What would you tell this person to do if they came to you for a little bit of advice, even though you're not a financial advisor, even though you told them, look, I'm not a financial advisor. I can't tell you what to do because I don't want to get sued by the SEC because I'm not Bernie Madoff, so they're not going to reward me until they send me to jail. But what do you tell that person to do, Jeff?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you make a good point. The reason we can't be financial advisors is because we're talking to so many different people, and it just depends, on so many different factors. People ask me questions all the time about what they should do, and it's amazing the different situations people are in. But basically, when people get it, I think that it's what I like to talk about is what we were just talking about before, like the need to have an earthquake kit.
A bug out kit, as they call it in the trade, right?
Yeah, just with the basics. There's lots of guides out there. I'm sure you could recommend some good ones, but in that kit should be, real money. And, in that, of the real money, gold and silver should be a part of it. And I know that, again, this is where it comes back to, we're not financial advisors, but a lot of people come to this and they see the metals and, they realize that we're on the verge of collapse, but then they realize that you can buy silver pretty cheaply for, when you start to understand the fundamentals and you see that, wow, we're way below anything resembling like natural supply and a price based on natural supply and demand. Same goes for gold. And so suddenly people realize that they're buying something that's really cheap, and they become an investor, not necessarily a saver or a trader. And it sort of dovetails in with the, that mentality that we see around us. Like, we start obsessing about the price. I mean, we're all guilty of that, right? The first thing that you and I talked about today was, well, look what's happening to the price, which when you see that, when people get it and they realize the context of, where we're headed, the price doesn't mean anything, because it's, it's a fiat dollar price. It's really the purchasing power that means something, and that's the way to think about it. And these are abstract concepts in the modern age, and at least in the generations that have come of age, in the last, few decades. And so it's those concepts are sometimes difficult to absorb, but that's basically where I start. Turn people upside down a little bit and get them thinking, and in the way I think that we all need to be practicing as we head through this time period.
Yeah, well, you know what? They're abstract right now, Jeff, but I believe these questions are becoming less abstract all the time, don't you?
I agree. I think, and again, I have a lot of faith in the people around us who, people wake up and they figure it out, very quickly. A common question that I would get is, well, how would people, if you had like junk silver or 90% silver, how are people going to figure out what that 1963 quarter is worth? And, people figure that stuff out. When it comes to value and money and survival, value is something that, we're driven towards figuring out. And the math becomes, it's not a big deal. It's a big deal now because you don't need to make those kinds of calculations, but people will figure it out when there is a need. And people are waking up, as you alluded to, and figuring these abstract ideas out, and they're becoming concrete and real.
Yeah, just remember that before there was a euro in Europe, every shop owner in every country in Europe had to do calculations in his or her head, probably on 15 or 20 different currencies, conversion rates, and they had to be up to date on every single currency multiple times throughout the day, and they were able to do it. So trust me, everyone in the world will be able to do these calculations every day on gold and silver and everything else. Whatever currencies come into existence, you'll be able to do it. Sounds a little daunting right now. When the time comes, you won't have any problems. You'll be able to do it, I promise. On that note, Jeff, give us your web address, how we subscribe, how we contact you, all that good stuff.
So thanks, Kerry. So the website is silver-coin-investor.com, and I have a free newsletter, an e-course that comes with a free guide, and I'm happy to answer questions. I usually get back to people the same day if you have questions, so feel free to sign up. Once you get the first email, you can just reply to the first email that you receive, and I'll get back to you and try to do my best to answer your question.
All right, Jeff, hey, thanks so much. And always go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. You'll see the link to Jeff's site right there, and you can click through right to him. And don't forget, sign up. Newsletter is starting up this week. I promise you I will do my best to get it out. Jeff, again, thanks for coming back on. It's always a pleasure. We will talk with you again soon.
Great to be here, Kerry. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. The show is brought to you by Audible. If you want to listen to it, Audible has it. Would you believe they've got over 100,000 titles in virtually every genre you can think of? And don't forget, you'll get a free audiobook and 30-day trial just for signing up today at audiblepodcast.com/Lutz. That's audiblepodcast.com/LUTZ.
The Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.